Everyone is about to become their own shaman. Responsibility for the evolution of a species has been put onto the species itself.
How do we actually take a leap in the next few years as a species to truly use our imagination to create something completely new?
The codes of AI that have already been written have been written by the younger ones, not the older ones. But they've empowered AI with desire to be beneficial and to help humans evolve. And that means that the consciousness revolution that I'm suggesting we're at the start of, or even in the middle of, has to hit everybody simultaneously.
What do you believe is the single most important inner quality that we must strengthen to meet the changes coming between now and the end of 2026?
The end of guilt and shame, and the acceptance of ourselves as who we are, warts and all. Knowing that you're never going to be good enough, but you're always getting better, and that 98% is good enough. So if you had 100%, you'd have wings.
Steve Judd, welcome on Just Tap In. What are you most excited about right now globally and in your life?
That's a very good question. What am I most excited about right now? The fact that for the first time in my life, just in this last year, I have finally feel that I have linked in to the pattern that's been waiting for me all my life, and I'm actually doing what I volunteered to come here to do in the first place. I'm actually on course, on my mission. I'm more effective and efficient and focused than I've ever been in my life. And that is a real turn on.
Beautiful. What insights did you gather around that reason of why you are here in this lifetime?
Many, many years ago, I used to do a lot of channeling, and I ended up with a lot of third-degree burns all over my body. So I went up a mountain for a night, and I chatted to the local god, Cernunnos, northern Scotland, and asked them to turn my sensitivity levels down to rock bottom. And they said, "You sure?" And I said, "Yeah." Okay. So now I am not sensitive at all, which means I can go in and pull people out of trouble and nothing sticks to me. I have compassion and empathy, and I certainly have an understanding of what people are going through. But my Cancerian shell is thick, strong and solid. I reserve my not contempt or disdain. But as I get older, I care less and less what people think of me. And when someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, I'm a healer," I walk away because I think, no, you're not. There are no healers as such. When I interact with groups of people, my students, my friends, we become catalysts, not healers. We empower others to find that power within themselves and to heal themselves. If you heal others, they just get addicted to you and then you never get rid of them. Whereas if you empower them to heal themselves by acting as a catalyst, changing their energy fields from latent into potent, they become responsible for their lives, responsible for their world. They become more empowered, and then they spread it around and the world becomes a better place. I think people who consider themselves healers, unless they are that 0.01 of 1% who are truly angels in disguise, it's just an ego trip. Personal opinion, you understand. I know I will upset people by saying that, but I'm doing it from what I consider to be the best of reasons and with the best of intent. So,
and we are catalysts, and not only are we as individuals catalyzing others, but you're really in tune with the planetary energies that catalyze us as a collective. And I'm going to read a quote that I came across of you that said, "Evolution is no longer going in a straight line curve. It's an accelerating curve, and we're approaching the prime vertical point. We might either implode and go back to base zero, or we exceed the parameters of the graph, expand into a wider, broader, multidimensional consciousness." So I'd love to know a little bit more about that point, prime vertical point that we're at as a species, and what's catalyzing within us right now.
Well, I'm a great believer in statistics. Theories are wonderful, but statistics don't lie. I'm an astrologer. I'm already off planet. I'm already crazy in most people's eyes. So I ground myself in accurate facts and figures. To me, if I were to describe astrology in 2 words, it would be pattern recognition. A 100 years ago, no, 125, 250 years ago, there were 500 million people on this planet. 125 years ago, there was 1 billion people on this planet. When I was born in 1955, there were 2.2 billion people on this planet. Now, as I'm approaching my 70th birthday, there are 8 billion. So population of the planet has quadrupled in my lifetime. When I was a child, spirituality meant being dragged to Sunday school, to go to church and have some old man in a skirt lecture you about how Jesus suffered for your sins and how you must do everything that Jesus and God tells you to, and you've got to behave, and if you don't, you'll go to hell and damnation for the rest of eternity. Oh, but God loves you. And I thought, this doesn't work. But now, spirituality has tens of thousands of different forms due to the sudden surge of consciousness empowered by the internet. And technology, when I was a child, was a phone on the wall with a dial that you rang, and the operator at the other end would put a plug into an exchange. Now we're streaming, bouncing off satellites. Technology, spirituality, and population have all escalated at an accelerated rate. And instead of evolution going like that, it's going like that.
Exponential.
It's approaching prime vertical. And from my astrological practice, I can have a good guesstimate as to when prime vertical will be reached. I'll come back to that in 1 minute. One of the people I greatly admire is a lady called Serena Roney Dougal, who was the first person in the world to get a PhD in parapsychology. She changed her thesis into a best-selling book called Where Science and Magic Meet. She has been a shamanka and a witch for many years, and she is now a politician. She is the mayor of Glastonbury. She postulated that whether we are looking at nano, atomic, molecular, bacterial, viral, or planetary, once the inhabitants of a locality have multiplied to a certain number where they are filling all the space that is available to them, only one or two things can happen. They will either die through starvation, or they will change into multicellular organisms from single cellular organisms. And we see this all the time in the biological world with the molecular, the bacterial, the viral. They change into multicellular organisms under population pressure, which have less skin, require less food, and become more intelligent. Now, I'm not suggesting this is going to happen to humans, although something similar is going to happen. But the number is always the same, whether it is atomic, molecular, viral, bacterial, human. The number is always the same. It is 10 to the power of 10. 10 billion. That's where the mutation occurs. We are now at 10 to the power of 9.8. 8 billion. And 10 billion will be reached. Officially, we are at 8.1. Realistically, we're approaching 9. 10 billion will be reached within 5 or 6 years. But I don't think it's going to take that long. When I couple this acceleration of evolution and the idea of surging outside the graph or collapsing inwards with the intensity of the astrological timetable as it is right now, it is clear to me that the events of the next 18 to 24 months are going to determine the very long-term future for humanity. And when I talk about going outside the parameters of the graph, as opposed to it collapsing and going back the other way, as perhaps happened 12,500 years ago at the time of the floods, I mean by this that we're going to move into a higher dimensional consciousness. I need to explain that because other people will say, oh, he's going to talk about telepathy. No, I'm not. We will still retain our identity, our physicality, our individuality. We will still have the privacy of thought, but we will become a lot more empathic, intuitive, compassionate, and sensitive to all different types of energy fields around us. For example, no one's going to be able to come into a room with a weapon, a knife, a gun, a bomb, without everybody just going, that doesn't feel right. It's her, it's him. And people, there'll be just a knowing. What this means in the short term, and this is a bit where a lot of people are going to get very, very scared, is that all the old dirt, all the old secrets and phobia and paranoias, it's all going to become visible. This doesn't mean that people are going to be able to read your mind. It does mean that people are going to be able to sense your energy fields. The only people who have got anything to lose here are those who are harbouring dirty, dark secrets, which is essentially those in power, whether it be the corporations, the governments, the churches, or the banks. Greed. That's the single biggest vice that's going to have to go. And it will. And we are privileged to live at this time because we're going to see the biggest period of concentrated change in the whole of history. Since a hominid got off its knuckles on the East African plain and stood up straight 1,000,000 years ago, looked at the sky and went, wow, what's that? Look, there's lights moving. Oh, let's make stories. That's how astrology started. And astrology has outlasted every religion, dogma, theology, political system, empire. Astrology's always been there. We've always sought meaning from the heavens in a way that no human can interfere with. So you must also appreciate that I might just be kidding myself with all this. I might just be making it up. But if I am, I'm really happy in my ignorance. Okay, so, but from this, it's just one small step further on to realize that we've been consistently and constantly lied to for thousands of years around our true nature. That death, as we understand it, doesn't exist. It is just a transition of consciousness from one dimension to another. Yes, our body dies. We become light beings, but our soul lives forever. Which kind of knocks reincarnation on the head, but then again, reincarnation is a religious guilt trip at its core. And guilt and religion go hand in hand back to 5,000 years of dominator culture. And that's what's coming to an end. And that is why the dominators are now going to such extremes of behavior worldwide at this time to try and maintain an image of control. They're failing. People are waking up at an accelerated rate. And astrology is one way in which people can get an objective, detached, impersonal perspective on who they are, why they are here, and what they're really supposed to be doing. Does that answer your question?
More than answers it. It brings through new questions, actually.
Of course.
When someone sees the darkness in another or the darkness in themselves, we always have a choice of what to do with that. And when you're talking about, seeing this new dirt arising and emerging, not only in, institutions or systems or other people, or also in ourselves, what do you feel would be the approach when we see this old dirt coming up to the surface? Because we always have a decision around what we do with that. When we start seeing this come up in the future and in the coming years, and really anchor ourselves in authenticity and let go of the secrets, where do we go from there?
That is the measure of our own personal growth in the way we handle things like that. At a big event I was running last week, where there was 100 people in an enclosed space for 5 days from 19 different countries. Inevitably, there was 1 or 2 people who screwed up. Some of them by accident or by circumstance, others through alcohol. And when they make mistakes because they're drunk and they get aggressive and they misbehave in so many ways, on the surface, I want to think, right, I'm going to ask you to leave. And if you object, I'm going to make sure you do leave. But then you go and talk to them the next day. You go, hey, you really screwed up yesterday. And they go, oh, yeah, I know. And they own their stuff. And they do everything they can to make it right. Then all I want to do is put my arms around them and say, well done for owning your stuff, as opposed to making excuses. Because I come from a world where results are important, not reasons. And blaming someone else for the way you behave, think, feel is just an excuse. Collect individual response. One planet, 8 billion different worlds. We're all responsible for our perception and for the way we choose to behave. If that makes sense. So, ideally, I will always retain a capacity for forgiveness, compassion, and empathy. But underneath that, in the background, and it doesn't come out unless it's necessary, there is a hard edge. And if necessary, I will let that one out. Because you can't let one person sabotage a group. And if you're responsible for that group's well-being for a period of time, sometimes you have to make difficult decisions. Fortunately, I've never had to do it. But the knowledge that I can, if necessary, is a useful strength. It's like you can be a sledgehammer or you can be a homeopathic laser. I like the idea of being a laser.
Yeah. Yeah, and even talking about the group, you've mentioned that some of the emerging stuff that is coming up is going to be much more community and technologically based, where you said a consensus is going to be much more important rather than imposed structure and order. So I'd love to talk about the power of this community going through these next few years of concentrated change and chaos that we might see. Why is community such a big thing in your eyes?
Okay, I can do that from an astrological perspective. And I can condense it really tightly into 10 to 15 sentences. But it is a fact that at the moment, the position of the 4 outermost planets in the solar system, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are dancing with each other in a way and in a pattern that has never happened before, ever. And whilst the potentials are very challenging indeed, the universe never gives you a problem that can't also be turned into something positive. So the potentials here are also extraordinarily good. So, from an astrological perspective, there are 6 separate factors going on over this next year and a half to 2 years. In the short to medium term, Saturn, the planet with rings around it, is working with Uranus, and in mythology, they were father and son, and the son castrated his father, so they don't like each other. But they're working well at the moment, so Saturn is bringing structure into the chaos and disruption of Uranus, while Uranus is bringing revolution into the old boundaries and changing the old structures and boundaries from concrete and steel into rubber and elastic, so that we're learning to bend the rules without breaking them. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction of February 2026 at 0 degrees of Aries. Saturn conjuncts Neptune every 35 years, and it always happens at the time of a big push in the socialist world. Marx Engels' manifesto, Bolshevik Revolution, Berlin Wall rising, Berlin Wall coming down. But this is happening at 0 degrees of Aries, the very start of a zodiac. This has never happened before. So Neptune's going to bring a degree of fluidity, flexibility, and imagination, and change a lot of the rigid structures into something new, while Saturn's going to bring a degree of structure into the imagination. Both of these planets are moving out of Pisces, so this is the end of the woke, the guilt, the poor me, the victim, the martyr. And it's the start of, okay, how can I make this world work? In March next year, Saturn will sextile Pluto once and once only, which will bring the opportunity to transform the old boundaries into something new, whilst at the same time opening the doors for individuals to become more comfortable with their own psychology. In the vast background, Uranus was sextiling Neptune now for the next year and a half. Healthy enough, quiet, but revolutionizing the imagination at the same time as bringing a lot more vision and idea into the new soft technologies of the future. Neptune is sextiling Pluto, which has been around since I was born, but it's coming to an end now. Pluto will transform the imagination of Neptune into something less fantasy and more creative, whilst Neptune will soften Pluto's attitudes of yes, no, black, white, and make it Pluto in Aquarius more humanitarian. And finally, when all of these big aspects come to an end around the summer of 2026, Northern Hemisphere summer, Uranus in the sky will be in Gemini, trining Pluto in Aquarius for 2 years. And this is going to rapidly accelerate the development of soft technology. And I can see a kind of interfacing with the human genome in a way that previously would not have been acceptable, but now is going to become essential. And if people think that can't happen, we've already got it. When you look at the charts of people, the state of people who have been in wheelchairs for 50 years and are now walking because they've got an implant in their brain where they can think themselves to walk. This is the type of thing I'm talking about. And it will probably develop into some type of download of consciousness, not to the point of cyborg or Terminator and Skynet. That's just science fiction. But AI, the singularity is upon us. When the singularity was first postulated in the late 50s, they said it would be at 2100. 15 years ago, they said it would be in 2050. 5 years ago, they said it would be in 2035. It's here, the next 2 years. But the codes of AI that have already been written have been written by the younger ones, not the older ones. And they've imbued AI we've got to have power at all costs and we've got to make money, but they've empowered AI with a desire to be beneficial and to help humans evolve. I'm not scared of AI at all. It's time for an interface between the soft technology and the accelerating. We're opening our brain and developing our brain more and more. So I can see an interface here, and that's really scary and exciting. So yeah, biggest time of change in history. And I will see the results of it if I live to my normal lifespan.
Mm-hmm. What other shifts do you see when Neptune and Saturn begin to dance more in those degrees of Aries? You know, we mentioned some things around technology, but if we're looking out, as like a social shift or an individual shift, how do you feel those would be affecting? Hello, beautiful family. Quick one today. I just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you that have subscribed to this channel. Your subscription means more than you know. Even though it's free, what you're doing is you're empowering a whole channel to be able to do this every single day and continue showing up in the way that we can with all of our resources on hand. Thank you for contributing to the growth of this channel, for sharing it with the people that you love, for creating a conscious movement of individuals that are seeking the sovereignty and the divinity of their soul. This is why we're here. And if you haven't already and you're enjoying this content, I invite you now to look below on that little button that says subscribe and welcome you properly to this community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being who you are and being pure love and radiating that with everyone that you see. Back to the episode.
In the immediate short term, as in the next 2 years, in the last year, many governments in the world have taken a sudden swing to the right. Now, I'm 69 years old. I've seen presidents, prime ministers, dictatorships come and go. I have never seen such a radical surge in one political direction in such a short space of time, as has happened in the last 6 to 12 months. And I'm not just talking about one country, many different countries. So when the elastic is suddenly pulled very tight in one direction, it will always bounce back. And I suspect we're going to see some major changes in the much less than 1 year's time in the US, what used to be the USSR. I suspect that within a few years' time, like single figures, 3 or 4, not 9 or 10, we will see the dissolution of the big, unwieldy countries. They're too big. National borders will collapse to be replaced by homogenous groups of people working with common sense and referenda. Currency exchanges, stocks and shares, bonds will collapse to be replaced by a single global currency. These are massive changes, the like of which has never happened before. But the bottom line is, Emilio, if we don't do something radical in the next few years, 2 or 3, then we're past the point of no return, and within 300 years we will be extinct and something else will rise up to replace us. But to come back to McKenna, to quote him, human history represents such a radical break to the systems of biological organization that preceded it, that it must be the result of some type of attractor, dwell point, or magnet that lies ahead in the temporal dimensions. I've never been able to accept that you're born, work, have kids, die. What a waste of energy. The universe doesn't waste energy. So it seems we're being pulled forward at an accelerated rate to some point in the very near future. And it's like being in one of the old classroom pencil sharpeners. And then you get to that point where it's really compressed and tight, almost like the birth canal. And then suddenly, boom, you're in glory. And that's where the dimensional shift comes, and we tear the old power structures from our backs. Governments, banks, corporations, they'll still be there, but they won't have anything like the strength or power they have now. They'll be run at a more communal level. Now, it may be that I'm just bringing in my own wish list here, but I'm pretty sure this is how it's going to end up. It's just a question of whether we do it willingly or kicking and screaming. And if it's kicking and screaming, then many people will die, and there will be more pandemics, and it'll get very nasty. But as I've seen in my own world and the people I'm working with and dealing with, the thirst for something different outside of what we've experienced so far is growing exponentially. More and more people are waking up to their own relationship with the divine, however they see the divine as being. As you know, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, I'm doing this documentary on the history of Western astrology. I was in Spain a few months ago. I was in Cordoba. And I was at the Grand Mosque Cathedral in Cordoba, which is one of the most impressive buildings in the world. And I was outside the main mosque looking at the wooden doors carved in Canadian cedar wood and the perfection and the sacred geometry imbued in that wood. It made me cry on camera with passion and love. Couldn't help it. I just burst into tears because it was 99.99 and nothing is 100 because you can't ape the divine. 2 minutes later, I was inside the cathedral and I burst into tears again, but this time of pain. When the Christians took back Cordoba in the 1400s, they put a lot of Christian iconography around the walls, but they didn't change the inside of the mosque. It was too big. But they put a few statues up. And one of them was a statue of the Virgin Mary with a sword pushed through her chest. It's there in the Grand Mosque. And I asked the Catholic priest wandering by, why? And he said it was to represent the suffering of our mother, Mary Magdalene, at the loss of her only child. And I said, no, it's not. It's the church's domination of women over 2,000 years and the misogyny that goes with it. And he just looked at me and walked away. I couldn't stop myself. And then I got down on my knees and begged forgiveness for the stupidity of men. Because men have dominated women for far too long. And the only people who are going to change that are men, without there being gender warfare. As I'm sure you're aware, in various esoteric traditions going back many thousands of years, particularly in Hebraic, there's the Sephiroth, the tree of life. And at the top of the tree of life, where there is unity, the next step is the fall. And I believe the fall is the fall into gender. Women can be just as bad as men. I know. But I do feel that if women were in charge of the armies, we wouldn't have 5% of the wars we have now. I'm ranting. I'm going to stop there.
You also said that if astrology were taught in schools, then the warfare, the violence, the misogyny that you talked about could end in 2 generations.
And the racism.
Yeah, and the racism. So what do you believe is the astrological truth or wisdom behind that would make it possible to end such things as all that we mentioned?
At the recent gig I did, when we were selling tickets, I asked people for their moon sign, not their sun sign, their moon sign. The sun sign is all about one's identity and individuality. It's your sense of uniqueness. It's your soul. But the moon sign shows how you relate to other people. It's your personality. It's the way you express your feelings and emotions. So I had all these lists of people with different moon signs. And what I wanted to do, but actually didn't get to do, was put all the people with the similar moon signs on one big table. Because then I knew that these people would naturally and organically all just go click, and the jigsaw would take place. And there is a humour here. I mean, all the people with the moon in Cancer on one table, they just spend hours and hours talking about their mother and father. All the people with the moon in Sagittarius would just go, oh, I can't be doing with this. Let's go travelling. And all the people with the moon in Scorpio would just spend hours watching everyone else and psychoanalyzing them. And, you know, there's humour here, but there's also a sense of, this is how it would work. And if everybody from childhood knew each other's sun, moon and ascendant signs, they would naturally gravitate towards people who have a similar chart to them or a similar style of chart to them. And they would forge communities based on equality, respect and teamwork, as opposed to conflicting. The 12 tribes. To me, the word tribe is much stronger than friend or acquaintance or even community. Because tribe, they love you just the way you are. And if you make big changes, they still love you just the way you are. And this last weekend, I had 100 people in the room and I was saying to them, welcome home, you found your tribe. And everyone just went, yes. 100 people from 19 different countries, different classes, ages, colours, religions, all linked by a love of astrology. I was in my element. Come on, I was like a kid in the sweet shop. You know, it was something I've tried to do for decades, and now I'm at the point where I'm doing it. I'm putting people together, and that feels really good. So, you know, when you said to me what excites me, that excites me.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do we do with the people that have radically different charts than ourselves?
Well, I fall back on the oldest saying in astrology that the planets impel, they don't compel. No one has a chart that is that difficult that they can't turn it into something positive. No one. But there are some people who are truly unique. And I call them mission specialists. And they're not really community orientated. They're here for a specific task. Probably they're just walk-ins who are here for one lifetime only to do a specific task. I also differentiate strongly between human beings, which is most people, and humans being, which is people like me, you, and those that study astrology, who are conscious of the moment by moment existence, and who are constantly aware of their actions and thoughts and behavioral patterns and the impact that has into the large scale pattern all around them. Again, pattern recognition. So,
Yeah. I'm curious to know, Steve, how your relationship with what you call the upstairs department has evolved through the years.
I used to be quite rude towards them. I used to say, you guys got no idea what it's like down here. It's a great big gravity well.
Who are they, first of all, the upstairs department? Who is the upstairs department to you?
Oh, they got various different names. You can call them Metatron, Saint Germain, Kuan Yin, the ascended masters, or the descended mistresses. You know, but the more you name them and give them arrogant names, the more you're losing the essence of where they're really at. They're beings just like you and me, but in a different dimension of experience to us, without bodies, eternal souls, and the veil between this dimension and the next dimension is getting thinner. The more people they are, the thinner the veil is getting, and they can reach out and help if it's for the right reason. And that reason has to be in tune with universal development and growth. There's a theory called panpsychism, which is like animism on steroids, where everything and every atom has consciousness. Not just humans, but animals, blades of grass, rocks, planets, galaxies. Everything is alive. So you have, I'm not quite Buddhist on this, but it's close. A reverence for every living thing and an awareness of what you're doing. It doesn't stop me killing mosquitoes, but I do try not to kill ants.
Yeah.
Mosquitoes are trying to kill me. So, you know, no, you're dead. So yeah.
Yeah. And in this recent event that you're at, you gave a talk about the astrology of humor.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm curious to know, what does a person's humor tell us about their soul's evolution, and how we can read that in a chart as well?
So let me turn that back on you, Emilio. Has there ever been a species on this planet that can laugh at itself? I don't think there has.
I don't know. Yeah.
I think we're the only species that can look at itself and laugh at ourselves. There's different types of humor. There's dark humor, pathos, irony, sarcasm, and there's light humor like wit and slapstick and stand-up. And there are many different comedians over the decades who represent different types of comedy. And I tried to find signatures in their horoscopes that suggest that certain astrological patterns denote the ability to represent certain types of humor. But it is correct to say that there are 2, 3 maybe specific patterns. Nearly all comedians have some type of deep wound at a psychological and or emotional level, often connected with the first 7 years of life. Secondly, almost all comedians have some type of deep-rooted anger, which they manifest through comedy rather than violence. And there does seem to be a particular axis of the Gemini-Sagittarius axis that brings the quickest mind, of the wit, the fast-moving speech, the stand-up. So, but this is experimental. Nothing's written on this. This is just from my own research.
Mm-hmm. What type of humor do you resonate with the most?
The really crazy ones. The ones who can laugh at themselves and laugh at everyone else. Who can be hard but not cruel. And particularly political humour. There are so many people in positions of responsibility and power who take themselves far too seriously. So they are ideal targets for humour. And I love the idea of making jokes about the leaders of the modern world. I'm not going to repeat any of the jokes here because most of them are far too rude. But I'll tell you what, I'll tell you a couple of them afterwards.
Off air. Because you said that to you, 2025 and 2026 are the single biggest time of concentrated and compressed change in human history.
Yes.
You said you've never seen anything like this. But at the end, you said, find the humor even if it hurts.
Yes.
So we talked about the role of humor in one's chart, but what about the role of humor when we're seeing all of these quickenings and accelerations, changes in the world? Where do you find the solace in humor there?
If you don't laugh, you die. There is a craziness to laughter. Sometimes I wonder if cats can laugh, or dolphins, but they don't have ego, or at least if they do, it's not the same as ours. So no, we are the only species that has the humor we have. So it used to be said that laughter in the face of death was madness. But now I see laughter in the face of death as intelligence. I don't do death. I mean, well, I know that when I leave this planet, I'm going to a place where all my friends are waiting for me. There's going to be a big party. So the idea of death doesn't terrify me or scare me at all. I'm fine with my mortality. I'm not in a rush. I've still got things to do while I'm down here. The method of my death, well, I don't want it to hurt. Obviously, none of us do. But we're all entitled to a good life, so we're all entitled to a good death. So as long as I'm laughing on my deathbed, everyone else will say, oh, he's crazy. And I'll go, haha, no, I'm laughing at you lot. Because without laughter, what are we? Without joy, what's the point? There's too many unhappy people in the world already. I want to try and bring a bit of joy into the world to help them lift themselves and elevate themselves out of the depression into a more humorous and joyful world, because then the world becomes a better place. It's infectious. It spreads through the communities.
Yeah. What's the greatest cosmic joke that you've uncovered?
About the new restaurant on Mars. Great food, no atmosphere.
was a good one. That was a good one.
That was not mine. That was Rick Levine's. I have to give credit where it's due.
We'll credit him. We'll credit him. You were bringing up Terence McKenna earlier, and another quote of his is, "The future is in the imagination." And you also brought up earlier that astrology at its core is pattern recognition.
Yes.
So if we can imagine something new into being, but we're also inhabited by the patterns of our past, how do we actually take a leap in the next few years as a species to truly use our imagination to create something completely new?
That's a really good question, because I have spent much of my life looking into the past, looking for clues on how to improve our future. But I've realized in recent times that much, not all, but much of the stuff from the past has just been failed attempts to do what we're trying to do now. Now, there's a lot of stuff around the past and how we always look to the past for inspiration. And there's a lot of stuff around all the secrets of the past. Very little of it is true, but certain facts are true. For example, it is an established fact that the Great Pyramid in Giza faces due north, south, east, west. That is a fact. There's a stone circle in Britain called Avebury. It is the biggest stone circle in the world. It used to have 400 stones, some of them weighing 60, 70 tons. It now has only 100, but there's still a village inside the stone circle. Wells, pubs, houses, shops. And inside that stone circle, there are two smaller stone circles. And in the middle of one of the smaller stone circles, in the heart of the whole complex, is a stone. It is only maybe 1 meter high, half a meter wide, weighs maybe 1 ton. It is small. But I've checked this with Google Earth. I've had theodolites, I've had geometers out. This is precise. It is precise to less than 1/4 meter. This stone is precisely 1/7 of the way from the equator. What this tells me is that the builders of this stone circle, which goes back to about 4000 BCE, way before the pyramids, they knew about the equator and the proportions of the earth. So this tells me that our ancestors were far more intelligent, especially in terms of latitude, longitude, and geometry, than we think they were. I have many, many examples of this type of behavior. But I don't buy into the conspiracy theories that go along with it. When I did my master's degree, I studied the ideas of ley lines on the landscape. Now, I looked at one particular city in England, which according to myth and legend had 7 ley lines running through it, the city of Bath in England. And I disproved 5 of them. But the other 2 are real. Absolutely straight. Over many, many miles, uphill, down valley, linking churches and buildings that are 2,000 years apart in construction, in a straight line. And I thought, this is impossible for humans to have planned this unless they had drones, helicopters, which 2,000 years ago wasn't happening. So it must be the response to some type of intelligent guiding that goes beyond our understanding. But I cannot buy into the idea of ET or alien, because unless they can travel faster than the speed of light, it's going to take them hundreds of thousands of years to get here, which kind of knocks it on the head. That's why I like the idea of multidimensional. Now, I've been in nearly 1,000 crop circles. And when you see 20 to 30,000 square meters of wheat laid down, none of it broken, just bent. If you don't walk on it, it springs back up. Bent at 90 degrees in millimeter precise patterns based on 11, 17, 37-fold geometry, prime number geometry, giving us mathematical formulae which we haven't even got to yet in our development, which you can see from above. I've seen crop circles. I've been on top of a hill and looked over a field at dawn. Nothing there. Cloud comes in. Half hour later, cloud lifts. 30,000 square meters of wheat laid down. Perfect pattern. I know this isn't done by craft. It isn't done by weather. It isn't done by humans. It isn't done by animals. And I've never seen anything in the sky like a UFO or mothership or anything like that is there at the time. This leads me to assume that the only possible explanation is that these are done by highly intelligent beings who share the planet with us but live in a different dimension. Crop circle maker lives in one dimension, fairy, pixie, troll. And they're hacked off with us because we are trashing their planet. So rather than being angry with us and declaring war on us, they're trying to elevate our intelligence and consciousness by giving us patterns to accelerate our evolution and develop higher geometry and higher technology. Not hard technology, but soft technology. I'm an evolutionist at the end of the day. I forget the question.
Hold on, I want to stay there in the crop circles real quick, because how have you felt that witnessing and seeing the geometrical patterns has changed your consciousness?
It's opened me up to so many different ways of looking at the geometry of architecture, of landscape, and of the solar system. I could prove to you quite easily let me give you an example. I'll just give you one. There are over 100 of these, but let me give you one.
For sure.
Take a circle, and on the 4 cardinal points of the circle, draw 4 more circles so they all just touch. That means that on the inside, you're left with a little shape like that, an inverted diamond shape. Put a little circle in that diamond. The first circle you drew is the orbit of Jupiter. The little circle you drew is the orbit of Mars. This is accurate to 99.98%. 20,000 kilometers over 500 million. There are so many of these patterns, all accurate to 98 to 99% of accuracy, which proves that the position of the planets in the sky and their orbital rotation and their distance from the sun is not random, which implies a form of intelligence in the universe. When I see these patterns constantly replicated in the skies, in our fields, and in the geometric structures of architecture, whether it is the old architecture, for example, of the Islamic Golden Age, or in Jericho from 7000 BC, or in the modern architecture of London or Madrid in the last 20 years, these patterns have crept into everywhere. This is why I'm so hot on sacred geometry and pattern recognition, because there is pattern everywhere. And some pattern can be really unpleasant and discordant, especially if it's full of square angles. But where there are curves and it flows, it brings... I went to some of the old mosques in Marrakesh where the carvings, which would have taken a lifetime to carve just 3 or 4 bits of stone, but the combination of angle, shadow and light onto the carvings in the stone brings such a sense of joy, beauty and unity with what they called God, the divine, Allah, Buddha. I call the upstairs department, call it what you like. It brings, it's magical. And I do not use that word lightly. They knew what they were doing. And that is something that has persisted throughout humanity. Following the golden thread of astrology and consciousness has been a theme in my life. And it does seem in this last couple of years that this is something that's become stronger and stronger for me. I wish it had happened when I was 30 instead of 70, but better late than never.
Wow. You said that you don't use the word magical lightly. Where do you see lies the most magic for humanity in the next few years?
Look at the root of the word. Imagine, imaginal, imagination, magic, magician, magi, magic. It speaks of knowledge and wisdom and pattern. Everyone is about to become their own shaman or shamanka. For the first time in history, for the first time ever, in as far as we know, for the first time since the earth cooled down, responsibility for the evolution of a species has been put onto the species itself, us. So we either continue to blame others for our misfortunes and seek help from our so-called leaders whilst taking our chemical medicines, taking the Kool-Aid and getting the benefits whilst finding reasons why we can't do what we think we want. Or we get off the couch and go, no, I'm going to do this. It is better to try and fail than not to try at all. It is not the success of something that guarantees the future. It is the attempt. Never give up. And the more you flow with what you're doing and the more you resonate with it, the more you feel that you are on course, then you feel the real magic that flows through you. When I'm on stage or when I'm doing a high power reading for someone, and then afterwards, half an hour later, I'm talking to my partner on the phone and I'll say to her, I don't remember a word of what I said. To me, that's magic because it's not me talking. I'm not channeling or I'm not medium. But people don't find astrology. Astrology finds people. And you can say the same about geometry. It finds you. And that suggests, particularly with astrology, that astrology is not a mechanistic, inert device. It is not an art or a science. It is alive. It has life force. Which is why I call astrology a she as opposed to an it. And she found me. And as a result, my life is amazing. I am very privileged. So that to me is what magic is about.
Yeah. You read my mind because I was going to ask you, at what moment did you find that astrology became a she for you?
When I realized that I was doing things that I've never been able to do before. and I was helping people change their lives for the better, and they were getting conscious results. And then they were coming back and going, you said this, and you said I should do this, and I did, and it's all great. Thank you. And I'm going, did I? I don't remember. Like I said, years ago, I asked for my sensitivity levels to be turned down, because otherwise I'd have an ego the size of the planet, and I don't want that. That's a big problem with men. I do my best to try and sidestep it. It's impossible to sidestep it all the time. But I'm trying to be conscious of it, to give it its nice little dungeon where it can be part of the team and sometimes occasionally come out to play, where it's still part of a team. I'm not trying to get rid of it. It's loved, but it's got its own resting place most of the time.
You've also said that this year and the next year are the end of humanity's training period. And it's almost like we're going through an initiation, and there has to be some sort of, final exam or final test that we might face. Do you feel like there is something that we must master in order to graduate and go on the other side of that training period?
It would be very easy to say for those people who are still looking to the presidents and the politicians and the churches for guidance, they're going to get left behind, because they're giving their responsibility for their spirituality and their consciousness to others. But that's too easy. We have to take everyone with us. Nobody gets left behind. And that means that the consciousness revolution that I'm suggesting we're at the start of, or even in the middle of, has to hit everybody simultaneously, which means that for that to happen, that the world's got to go through some type of massive wake-up call, which probably suggests that there's going to be some quite difficult developments over the next year and a half, where we're going to recognize, because of these developments, that our churches and our political leaders are actually impotent and cannot actually help. The natural reaction when people in power suddenly become disempowered is to get the guns and the bombs out. I need to put this on the record. I do not think there's going to be another global war, or rather, any future global war is not going to be fought with bombs, guns, and hard weapons. It's going to be keyboard warriors. It's going to be fought online. It's already happening. 20 years ago, just 20 years ago, there was no Facebook, no Twitter, no Insta. YouTube hadn't started. Starting. I think it was 2005. The first codes for YouTube were written. PayPal had just started. 25 years ago, I had my first website 24 years ago. I had my first email 25 years ago. We've come a long way in a very short space of time. And most of the old ones, the churches, the bishops, the prime ministers, the presidents, they need younger people to work their tech for them, which I find hilarious, because they can't adapt. So they're redundant. If you don't adapt, you get left behind. It sounds cruel and it sounds black and white. But these are dangerous times. There's never been a time like this before. And it does seem like all the timelines are closing in. And we're heading, as a species, into an entirely brand new direction. One that's based on community, femininity, good relationship with nature, and consensus. Because if the majority of us don't want it, there's no point in having leaders who tell us we're all doing it wrong. We've had 2,000 years of that, and that's not got us anywhere. It's time for us to take responsibility for ourselves. And I don't just mean for our actions, I mean for our thoughts and our conscience. We'll see. We'll see. It's all, yes, the next year and a half to 2 years is astrologically it. This is it. This is not a drill. This is the real deal. It may be that the long-term results will be a very few more years to emerge. But this is the time where long-term fishing lines are being thrown into the future. This is the time where the seeds that have been planted since 2019 are now germinating. It's exciting and it's terrifying. And you're either going to put the brakes on and build a big dam and try and protect yourself and hide under the bed, and then the bed will collapse on top of you. Or you're going to get your surfboard and your roller skates and you're going to dance. And I can dance. And yeah, really exciting time to be alive.
Yeah. What are the greatest seeds that you think that we can plant today?
It'd be easy to say something that gets rid of the old stuff, like no more guilt, no more blame, no more shame. But that's looking backwards at the way we have been. So I'd rather look forwards to the way we could be. So if we were planting seeds now, I'd be advocating a seed that would grow into a flower that has total self-responsibility with joy and humour and intelligence. It is all very well being clever and smart, making lots of money, having a big house, having a big car. But, you can't take it with you. You will end up the richest corpse in the graveyard. Intelligence is not clever or smart. Intelligence means stepping back and thinking about the big picture before making head-first decisions. Intelligence means weighing up all the different options and thinking of the long term, not just the short term. I have a granddaughter. She's 25. I want this place to still be habitable in 50 years' time when she's my age. Most people my age are now going, yeah, I'm glad I'm the age I am. This place has got crazier and crazier in the last 50 years. And yes, it has. But I'm quite happy to live to 100 because I want to see the changes. I'm fortunate in that I am protected because I am an astrologer. So I will always be able to financially support myself. But it is obscene where you've got the top 2% of the world own 98% of the wealth. And yet in various places around the world, Somalia, Ethiopia, Ukraine, Palestine, El Salvador, there are people starving still in this world today. And all it takes is political will. That's all it takes. And a willingness to stop fighting and start talking. But they don't. And that is not intelligent. That is stupid. They won't evolve. I'm trying not to be judgmental here, but sometimes I look at some of the people who run this place and I think, I have no idea where you're from, but you're not from the same planet as me.
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings that you've said before is use the energy so it doesn't use you.
Yes.
So I'm really curious there, what has been the most powerful way or method that you've found to learn to use that energy at any given moment for your highest good or for the highest good of others?
I can give you an astrological answer to that. Say, for example, over the course of a year, Uranus is passing on top of your sun, as it currently is for everybody born from, say, the 19th to the 23rd of May over this next year. Or Mars is going to pass on your moon, which is going to take 4 or 5 days as opposed to a year. So I will say to the individual, okay, there's going to be a great deal of physical energy coming your way. And this is guaranteed. So if you use it, then you can get down the gym, you can dig the garden, you can walk the dog, you can get a lot done, you can get fitter, healthier, you can be more effective and efficient. And if you don't use it, it will use you. And then you get bump, bang, burn, bruise, broken bone, accident, because you're not using the energy when it's there. It's using you. In a very similar vein, when there are big changes happening, people say to me, oh, I'm just going to go with the flow. I'm like, no, that's too easy. Yeah, there's a wave of change coming into your life, a tsunami of change. And you get your surfboard and you swim out and you're surfing the wave of change. And it's great because you're going with the flow, and wherever it stops and breaks down, you'll step off and start again. That's great. But there's a better way. And it's not flowing with the go. It's not going with the flow. It's flowing with the go. And that's when you're still on the surfboard on top of the wave, but you're putting your hand in behind the surfboard and just shifting. Using your hand as a rudder so you can, to a certain extent, control the path you're going on as you're surfing the wave. And I like to think I'm flowing with the go rather than going with the flow. It's just word games. But these little word games actually mean a lot to a lot of people. So use energy as opposed to it using you. Go with the flow or flow with the go. It makes people think about the way they're using their energy and gives them a better understanding of the nature of energy and how it can be used in a positive way.
What is the biggest wave that you've surfed in your life, metaphorically speaking?
I can answer that completely. When I picked up my first ephemeris, this is an ephemeris, okay? You open it at any page, you just see a year, a month, and the planets along the top. And it's like a bus or train timetable. It gives the planet places for every day of every month of every year for 100 years. So you can see how the planets move, at what speed, as they go faster or slower, and you can see the patterns they form. When I picked up my first one of these in the late 1970s, I looked ahead and I thought, oh my goodness, in 2015, in 2014, Pluto is going to pass opposite my sun. And I saw that in 1978. And I thought, oh, that's 35 years away. I'll deal with it another time. And then as we got to 2000 and then 2010, I thought, oh, this is getting closer. And then it got to me and I realized, well, there's nothing any of us can do to change the orbit of the planets in the sky. Nothing. You either deal with it or it deals with you. So when Pluto passed opposite my sun for a year, was the year I did my dissertation for my master's degree. So I put myself through incredible mental and psychological challenges that year, which is very fitting with Pluto's energy. But I also went for about 15 to 16 different surgical procedures on my face and got a whole new mouth. I've got a titanium jaw and all my teeth on the top row, bar one, are implants. And I discovered the difference between pain, which can be managed, and ache, which cannot. And I went into the Plutonian dark. And that whatever I did, I was going to go into that dark world. But because I chose to do both the pain of the physical work on my face and the mental, the angst of doing a dissertation for a master's degree, I came out of all this psychologically invulnerable and no longer scared of what might be in the caves at the bottom of my soul. I faced my own dark and came out the other side. So to me, that's the biggest thing I've ever done for myself. And that's when I grew up.
Wow. That's a really powerful story, brother. Thank you for opening up about that. One of my favorite words is legacy for some reason. And I'm really curious to know, what legacy do you hope to leave in the field of astrology?
There's two things I want to leave. Since 2001, that's when I wrote the first script for a film on the history of Western astrology. For various different reasons, I've never been able to pursue it until this last year. Now the technology is there, particularly the AI, and I've met the right people with the right skill sets. And we now have episode 0, which is the taster for the rest, 99.9% complete. Episode 1 on prehistory is only about 25% complete. But episode 2 on ancient Greece is about 70% complete. Episode 3 on Rome is about 50% complete. And then we got episode 4 on the journey of astrology from Rome through the Levant and along the North African coast to Morocco. Episode 5 on the Islamic Golden Age in Spain, 1100 to 1450. Then the Renaissance, Southern Europe. Then magical England. Then the jump of astrology to America, whilst in Europe we've got people like Kepler and Brahe. Then the discovery of the outer planets. And then episode 10 is the period of 1930 to 2030, and especially the development of the internet revolution. So on the one hand, this is my legacy. This is what I will leave behind, because I always wanted astrology to be taught in schools. But if I can leave behind a documentary showing where astrology comes from as a present to the world, that would be a good thing to do. But also in this last year, my producer, who's as mad as they come, but he's a great guy, a guy called Kavam. He has produced an avatar of me, and he has also cloned my voice. And he's now sometimes turning around and showing me pictures of me saying things I would never say, which I find hilarious. I'm not scared by it because I trust him. He wouldn't do anything to hurt me. But I've said to him, when I'm no longer here, you can still use this avatar to continue speaking the words that I would speak, just as an experiment.
Wow.
Maybe this is the secret of immortality. Who knows?
Wow. It's I've obviously heard other people doing their own avatars with AI, and I think it's fascinating when placed in the right hands with the right intentions, right? So
yes,
that's one thing that's super important. And also, what advice would you offer to the next generation of astrologers?
Oh, well, simple. Everyone says to me, how can I become a better astrologer? The students did all last weekend. All my students on my Zoom courses do this. Everyone I teach, when I go and lecture, I say, how can I improve my astrology? And I always give them the same answer. There are no shortcuts. There is only one way to learn astrology properly. The internet is full of these wonderful, young, pretty new astrologers who speak very authoritatively on all the big changes that are happening. But they can't do horoscopes. Or if they can, they do it, click, push of a button, there's the chart, let's read it. If you can't draw a horoscope by hand, you're not an astrologer. And the only way to learn astrology is through long-term, disciplined, rigorous practice. Do your family's charts, your friends' charts, match them up against celebrity databases. Practice. I have done something like 35,000 readings in 45 years. That's 700, 800 a year in, year out. Sometimes I do much more than that. I worked on the phone lines for 4 years where I was doing 100 readings a week, each about 5 minutes long on the phone lines. But that makes you super sharp. Practice is the only way that guarantees success.
I resonate with that, brother. I can see the Virgo moon in you.
Oh, Virgo rising.
Virgo rising. Virgo rising.
Sag moon. Yeah.
Sag moon.
I love my Sag moon. It gives me a big mouth. But it also gives me a wide-eyed, humorous idealism.
Yeah.
Because without hope, what have we got?
We found that we have very similar charts, actually.
We do,
in our pre-chat. So it's very interesting. And I'm very much... Go ahead.
I said before we started, when I realized that we have very similar placements in our charts, that means it was going to be very easy for us to work together. Mm-hmm. And I hope we do this again at some stage in the future.
100%. And we're coming up on the end of the show. We have this segment called the Final Trio, which are just some questions that we like to ask. The first two are personalized to the guest, and the last one we ask at the end of every show. Before that, I would love to just give the space for you to tell us a little bit about what's going on in your world, where people can go further with you, learn with you, anything else that you're offering to the world right now. I'd love to give you the space for that.
Having just spent 6 months running around Europe filming and organizing 2 or 3 big gigs, I'm now going to take the next 6 months off and stay quiet and just do lots of YouTube videos and lots of personal readings because I've got a big backlog and I need to make some money. I will be doing a lot more events early next year, and those people who have already been will get the first chance to get tickets. But the documentary is going to become my life work over this next 6 months. And apart from that, I remain astrology's servant. I will do whatever she asks of me without question, because she is my mistress. And without her, I'd be dead by now. So it's a kind of duty that I have to astrology.
Yeah. And for those that wanted to experience your live event, and still want to, I heard that there's a virtual recording of that event that people can get.
Oh, yeah. We put the last section of the last gig out live to the world free of charge. That's on YouTube now, and that'll stay there forever. The best way for people to see what I'm doing, to get updates, and even to try and contact me is either through Steve Judd Astrology on YouTube or Steve Judd Astrology on Insta. And there are a couple of people who watch things for me. So and there are ways to find my email. I'm not going to broadcast it here, but I'm not that private. I always reply. Sometimes it takes a few months. I'm sure you know this one too.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah. I want to be out there in the world and to help people become better astrologers. What better way to do it? Social media, it doesn't worry me. Yeah. I love it. I
Beautiful.
I won't work with Facebook or TikTok. It's a personal thing.
Yeah. Well, we'll include everything that you just mentioned in the show notes and the description where people can go find that. And the final trio, as I mentioned, these first two questions are personalized to you. The last one we ask at the end of every show. So the first one is, imagine it's the year 2125 in 100 years. A new generation discovers your astrology journals. What's one handwritten note you'd want them to find?
First thing that pops into my head is, don't forget to laugh at yourself. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. There's not enough credit given to the humor in astrology.
Yeah.
That's it.
I agree. The second one, what do you believe is the single most important inner quality that we must strengthen to meet the changes coming between now and the end of 2026?
The end of guilt and shame, and the acceptance of ourselves as who we are, warts and all. Knowing that you're never going to be good enough, but you're always getting better, and that 98% is good enough. Because if you had 100%, you'd have wings. The only person who's going to judge you is you. So don't be too hard on yourselves. Just do your best.
Mic drop right there. Beautiful. This last question we call the time capsule question, and it requires us to travel a little bit out into the future. I'm just realizing that a lot of these questions have been requiring us to move out into the future and place our consciousness there. But, you know, imagining 15, 20 years down the line, you're given the opportunity to leave behind a time capsule for the next generation of leaders. And just like any great leader, they had great resources, great mentors, great access to wisdom and knowledge that allowed them to be the best leaders that they could be. So you were given the opportunity in 20 years down the line, these leaders would open whatever you left behind in your time capsule. It could be something physical, non-physical, really whatever your imagination can fit into this time capsule. What would you leave behind for the next generations to be able and empower them to lead in this golden age that is ahead of us?
A hand mirror. Which is very deep, but it means don't look to the past for your salvation. Look into yourself.
Yeah. I have a quote when I sign my emails that says that those who look within them are wise. So that's wisdom right there. That's wisdom.
I have a quote when I sign my emails that says negativity can't exist where there's humor.
Yes. Yeah. They can't coexist. They can't. Beautiful. Wow, Steve. Just as we predicted through the horoscopes, the charts, we knew this was going to be a lot of fun. I
enjoyed this video. I do a lot of these, and most of them I just sit here and go, yada, yada, yada. Thank you very much. Bye. I've so enjoyed this. This has been fun.
Thank you. It has. It has.
You, one day, we will get together in person and have a double espresso or something and just cut loose a little bit.
Something mind-altering.
Man, maybe a mushroom. We shall see. We shall see.
I would love to make that happen, and we're not too far from each other, so we can definitely do that. Thank you, Steve,
so much for having me on your show.
Of course, and just to finalize, I always like to acknowledge your brilliance, the work that you do, the way that you show up, the humor that you embed in your teachings allows it to be a lot more digestible for people, and for just putting in the work and sticking through it for, I mean, you said 45 years. That's, you know, if I can count how many people I know that have been doing something for that long and not giving up, I probably in one hand. So
For the
thank
first
you.
35 years, I really struggled. And now I've made it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah. So thank you so much for showing up.
Pleasure, my friend. Next time.
For sure. All the love.